Hello, everyone. What's going on? SJ Anderson here, coming to you live to talk about this full moon in Capricorn coming up here very, very, very soon. And it's just glad to be here, glad to be streaming this, glad to be diving into the astrological energies as always. I think it's a wonderful task that we have as astrologers, and as astrology enthusiasts, and as astrology, inclined people to map the movements, map the heavens, map where things are moving and shaking in the reality. That's kind of the task of the astrologer, to describe the movements and describe the meanings that come with those movements and the kind of symbolic meaning set that we're always moving through. So I'm happy to be here with you and get to do that today. And as always, I'm going to bring in a slide, or not as always, but today I have a slide presentation. I've often had these, and I like using these because it can ground the preparation. It can kind of make sure the conversation stays on task. So this is about this full moon in Capricorn coming up this weekend, 21 July, 10:18 UTC. So wherever you are, you can calculate back from UTC. America, we'll be early in the morning on the 21st of July. You get into Europe, you're more in midday. You get into Asia, you're in the evening. But it's pretty much across the world. It'll be on that date, the 21st of July, this Sunday. Always keep in mind these full moons are peaks of energy. So if there's some wonkiness and some restlessness, that's because there's a full moon. And you might see howling. Where I'm from in Austin, Texas, everybody would go down to this pool, Barton Springs, and then we would howl at the moon. There were the full moon swims down at Barton Springs. Some of you may have attended some of those. Great, Polly, welcome here. Really glad that you're here and that you can catch this live. I'm happy to have you and happy to have everybody here. So let's just keep going. What we're going to do in this video is first a contextualization within time. So that's basically just looking at some of the interesting transits and the interesting contexts of this moment, things I find relevant to talk about. And you'll see here, I will get into in this section some of the recent events that took place in America. I'm not going to focus too much on the mundane astrology, though. I will mention some of that here. I like to, focus a lot more on the, interpersonal or the symbolic activation side of transits. But there will be some sprinkling into that mundane, real wild events, right, that happened with the presidential campaign and the presidential race in America. So we'll touch base on that. Then we'll go to the more strict delineations of the full moon, trying to capture some of those energetics. Remember with full moons that they're markers in time. They're like snapshots, and they come, every month. New moons come every month. And so every 2 weeks, we have either a new moon or a full moon. And it's kind of a dance or a way that we maneuver within reality, kind of like rowing a boat. You row on either side to keep things moving forward. These syzygies, as I call them, the new and full moons, are very important just to check into energetically, because another aspect is that their energies and their symbols can stick around for a 2-week period until we get a reset with that next new or full moon. In ancient astrology, they talked about the prenatal syzygy. So everybody has a new moon or full moon that you were born into its energies. And that's another way to look at your own birth chart, is to go to that prenatal syzygy to understand those energies you're born into, new or full moon. So I love always checking in with these. It's one of my favorite ways to syncopate my astrological, analyses. So we'll then come into an election for the waning phase. Won't be too long. I have one that I think is a winner there. And then we can do some questions and answers at the end. So that's what we're going to do in this talk. Hello, all. Hello, Paula and Polly. Welcome. Let's just keep moving through. So the first thing I want to point out, this full moon has 5 of the 7 traditional planets either in Gemini, Cancer, or Leo. You see how they're conglomerated here. Jupiter and Mars together in Gemini, the Sun still in Cancer, and Venus and Mercury in Leo. So these 3 signs, this snapshot, this full moon snapshot tells us, hey, check out these 3 signs of the zodiac, or these 3 whole sign houses. Your Gemini, Cancer, or Leo whole sign houses. And the reason why this is so important, and this full moon is so important, is that Gemini, Cancer, and Leo over the next period are the key players zodiacally, because Mars will be in Gemini by the time this full moon hits. Mars will remain in Gemini 20 July through 4 September. Mars will then be in Leo or Cancer for over 9 months, almost 10 months, because there's a full Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer at the end of this year and into 2025. And then Jupiter is now in Gemini, but then it goes to Cancer and then to Leo, 2024 and into 2027. And so we'll have long-term cyclic activation in Gemini, Cancer, Leo for a while now. And this moment in time, this full moon activates all of these signs. And so it's great to be paying attention and feeling in and studying these sectors of your chart, because they're going to remain relevant for a continued period in the middle of this decade of the 2020s. Okay. And we're going to break down a lot of these symbols in this talk. I'm not going to do that on this slide. It's more of a point of timing and just knowing that how important it is to pay attention now because of the activations across these key sectors that will remain activated. All right, let's push. What is Mars? And I want to come back in to just think about Mars in this moment. We know Mars is a exaltation lord of Capricorn. So with a full moon in Capricorn, Mars is going to play a role in the symbolism of this full moon naturally. It rules the full moon. But Mars being in Gemini, Mars then being retrograde, I want to lay out a little bit of what Mars does here just to help us prepare for this phase of the next 9 months, 10 months, really. It's 18 June 2025 until Mars gets a new sign of the zodiac. And so we'll be grappling with Mars and what it is and how it functions one way or the other for a while now. It takes over as kind of a main planet here. And I think this full moon, because Mars will have just entered Gemini on the 20th of July, this full moon is a martial full moon. It rules the full moon, and Mars is now squaring Saturn. But what is Mars? Passion and action, put simply. And I know some people might be saying, well, what about violence and riots and blood and death? I mean, yes, those are all martial things too. But I think the core of the energy is passion and action. It's where we get so enthused about something or so worked up that we're moved to act based on those emotional triggers. And Mars drives us. You hear words like drive when people talk about Mars. It's what propels. And so action will be a main theme, filtering into those whole sign houses in those sectors. Acting in Gemini through the mind and through the language, acting in Cancer through the home, maybe refraining from action because Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Action around our identity, who we are, what we're here to do, Mars and Leo, and then reconsidering those identities, changing actions, reconfiguring actions as Mars goes retrograde at the end of 2024 and into 2025. And this full moon moment, like I said earlier, is just a pre-activation moment where we have these martial themes with many planets in the signs that are highly relevant in 2024, 2025, and beyond. So we're just beginning this story of thinking about how we act and what we're passionate about in these three sectors of our charts, these three whole sign houses. Let me see here. Let's see here. Zia, really nice vibes on this channel. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. I'm loving being here with you, and I love talking about astrology. Appreciate you guys. Okay, let's push on. And this is what I was alluding to earlier. By the time we get here into the middle of August, you have Mars squaring Saturn on the 16th of August. Mars and then Jupiter squaring Saturn on the 19th of August. And so this square from Pisces to Gemini with Mars and Jupiter on the leading edge and then Saturn in the superior position defines the next little period. And we'll talk more about the Jupiter, Mars, and Gemini symbolism later, but just know that we're out of that beginning June period of softness, and we now cross the threshold into the more intensified second part of July, pardon me, I'm already back in June, but the beginning of July, that softness with the Cancer new moon, and now we're crossing into this more dynamic period in all of August with Mercury retrograde also during the time of this square. And then, of course, there's this event, okay, and I'm going to talk about it a little here because I think this was the defining event in July, the mid-month event that then ramped everything up. And you can see this was a slide from my last talk, but the second full moon has Mars Saturn square, the second full moon in Capricorn, and Mercury is now in shadow for this full moon in Capricorn. So that's why this full moon this weekend is a little bit harsher and more throttling and maybe more propelling us through discomfort into some change than that stuff that was going on earlier in the month. And of course, in the mundane world, you can see the big event, right? Here it is. We have to talk about it. I haven't talked about this at all yet on my channel, but I want to bring it in here. I didn't feel the need to be staying right on top of all of this stuff and freaking out and doing lives and just making content about it, just because we'll have plenty of time to process it. This isn't going away. This symbol isn't going away. These events aren't going away. And I'm kind of less interested in a certain way because I just don't want to feed the hype, and feed the, fear mongering. But, Trump injured, right, but fine now. And sadly, someone appears to have lost their life here with that stray bullet. That's not good, and that changed everything in terms of the symbolic nature of our processes, in terms of the election cycle that we're in the middle of, in terms of the year 2024, all of it with these events. And I want to point out additional context about this full moon in Capricorn is that it's in the last degree of Capricorn, that is a huge player over the next months. Why? Because Pluto will station direct in this degree, in the last degree of Capricorn, 29 degrees. Pluto stations direct there on 12 October. And that's the final boss of the Pluto and Capricorn transit. This little 6 weeks or whatever it is of Pluto back in Capricorn, because Pluto will never be in Capricorn again in our lifetimes, 250 years until Pluto gets back, roughly. And so this is it. It's the completion of this task that began in 2008. This Capricorn full moon triggers that degree where Pluto will station. And what it then means, and by the way, Pluto is in Capricorn in the 29th degree of Capricorn during the election. So I think that this month of July with these two full moon in Capricorns, and then we see these events, these very Plutonic events, tell us a little bit about the nature of like election season in America. It's global news. I mean, I've seen it here in Europe where I am, just all over the TVs. Everybody's talking about the Trump event there. So I imagine we may be getting more of it. The crazy may have started in a way with the mundane astrological unfoldments of election season 2024 in America, and therefore global, because America being so central in terms of its role in the world. Now, the next slide I want to bring in is the fact that we now have the Sibley chart. And this is the American birth chart we use for America. In that Sibley chart, Pluto is in the 28th degree, the second to last degree of Capricorn. And so the Pluto return is not over. And I think that's what we've seen partially with this Trump event, is that we're back into things like who is controlling the country, what are the interests behind the scenes that would want to take someone out. I mean, and I don't have any theories that I'm bringing forward here on any of this. I don't mean to offer this in some kind of way to frame it one way or the other for the political benefits of either side, but just know it fits the Plutonic symbolism, the underworld, the hidden, the secret, and violence that can emerge, that Plutonic nature. And so any planetary return, and you might find this useful because everybody has planetary returns all the time. It's when any planet returns to the same sign that it was in your natal chart, is a doubling up of those natal themes. And so that's one way to grapple with the delineation of a planetary return. You just double that topic that is already embedded in your natal chart. So in the Sibley chart, we have Pluto in the Capricorn second house, deep and transformative truths about resources of all kinds. And when we're delineating collective or mundane astrology, resources can become things like elections, or about how the leader is picked. Like, that's all the resource of the nation. You might even argue that the president or the leaders are resources of the nation, second house, because they are what makes the nation run, the engine of governance, the engine of the resources available to that entity to make things happen. It's an analog in our natal work, is that the second house, 10th house, and 6th house are all work houses, so-called career work houses. It's the career, and this is the 10th house where you normally find in mundane work the leader, okay? But the second, 6th, and 10th are all a trigon of houses, because they're all of the same element when you use the whole sign house system, and they work together thematically. So that second house, I think, does bring in some ways, the idea of the leader, and the resources in the leader are connected through that trigon of whole sign houses. Let me come in here to some of these questions or comments. Let me come back here. Thank you all. I really appreciate you guys. Let me see here. Pluto power. Yes, that's very true. We've got this Pluto power that they're talking about, Inari, and I think we're not done with this idea of the Plutonic American year, and that's just getting ramped up. This full moon right in the degree of Pluto's station. I think we're feeling that. Polly, I wasn't taken surprised by the shooting. Yeah. And, everybody was talking about Algol. This is one thing. And so many of my colleagues have covered this extensively. So it's not something I want to repeat altogether. But yes, Algol on Mars, on Trump's midheaven. It's one of these astrology and its symbolism coming into our reality. It's a real win for astrology on the one hand. We talk about astrologer good. This was the hashtag going around X Twitter a few years ago. And anytime like a bad event happened, but it would match the astrology, astrologers were like, hey, at least there's this silver lining of astrologer good. We know astrology works. We know the symbolism of astrology can teach us and help us process moments even before they happen, and certainly after they happen, and as we're processing them after the fact. So always paying attention to astrological symbolism as a processing tool and as a forerunning symbolic activation tool, I think is very, very wise. This was a perfect example with that Algol activation. And I want to keep us connected here. This was from my talk, and I'm going to show you those videos later, but I had a couple of videos that I want to point you to. This was a video I made on my channel called The Rebirth of America. And I broke down a lot of cycles that we're in basically, or will be in soon, and how America is about to be greatly transformed because of these cycles. But one of the subtopics in that talk was the 1960s Saturn-Jupiter clock. That's where we are now, because Saturn and Jupiter, Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Gemini, puts us to the mid-1960s. And during that mid-1960s period where we have a match with Saturn and Jupiter, the cardinal eclipses during that decade brought a bunch of themes of assassination. So JFK assassinated during a series of cardinal eclipses, RFK assassination, MLK Jr. assassination, both in 1968, where you had the Aries Libra eclipses in the same configuration that we have now. It's resonant to 1968 with our eclipse cycle in 2024. And we saw assassination as a major, major theme of that politics season. And, fortunately, there's not a death in this season so far, but talking about this last year and now seeing us active in it and seeing that theme emerge, it does give us another example of astrologer good and how we can use astrology as a predictive processing tool. And it's why we do astrology, to help us understand, okay, this is just crazy cardinal eclipses, mid-1960s. That's what's happening here in 2024. Okay, so let me flip through and just continue along here. I just want to point out, look, we may never know the true nature of these events. I'm raising the events and I'm talking about these events with Trump over last weekend. But, you see here, there was reports of a glass fragment, not a bullet. I don't think we're really going to truly know. Maybe the investigations will continue here in the weeks and months as we get farther into 2024. Maybe Mars coming to square Saturn. Which this new moon will be the second day of Mars square Saturn by sign. Maybe this will become more important, or you'll see stories about, who the shooter was and who was behind it, or if it was a greater connected group, or I'm sure groups will try to frame or couch it one way or the other. But I think it's like those assassinations in the mid-1960s where we're never going to really know the true nature. And I'm not certainly trying to assume one way or the other what really happened with the event. But I want to point out, this is the nature of Algol. And I have 2 videos on my channel. This was one of my first videos from 4 years ago when I just started the channel, Algol, Conspiracy and Death. And in that video, you can go look at Algol and how it's connected to a few nativities. I think I look at Princess Diana's death chart, Elliott Smith's chart, Pier Paolo Pasolini's chart, the Italian poet and filmmaker. And then there was one other one, I think. But in all of those in all of those lives, there is this question of a death, and no one really knows kind of what happened, lingering questions about the true nature. And I think we'll get that with this event, and because of the Algol Mars conjunction that was on Trump's midheaven, it's an Algol moment. So we're brought into this Algolian, smoke and mirrors, and the land of smoke and mirrors with Algol. And then I want to point you to that video I already talked about the rebirth of America. That was 8 months ago. You can watch that. That's a long video. It was a talk I gave with Wade Caves' organization. I forgot exactly which one, but I think they're calling it like World Astrology Conference or something. They put those on every year or every 6 months. So I was lucky enough to be able to speak at that one, but I was able to then release it on my own channel. So check these two out if you want to go deeper into this mundane astrology that I think, again, we're talking about the full moon in Capricorn. It's triggering the Pluto return. It's triggering Pluto in Capricorn. That's why I want to bring this stuff in. And I wanted to talk a little bit about it. It's such a big event. So many people are all over the Trump, Mars, Algo, Uranus on the midheaven events. And the election cycle and all of it is highly relevant to where we are. And I'll be talking more about the election, I'm sure. I'll probably do another video maybe right before, and maybe I'll give my kind of final thoughts. But a lot of time left until the voting. And so I'm not so certain. We'll see what happens. I mean, a lot could happen from now until that time. So it's really kind of unclear where the energies are pointing, in my opinion. So, okay, let's keep going. Now we're going to come into this second part of the talk, just the delineation of the full moon, talking more about interpersonal astrology, maybe themes to look out for in your own world and life, off of that mundane focus. But anytime you got Capricorn, there's two planets you want to go right to, Saturn and Mars. Where are they? What do they do in the chart? That will inform us how Capricorn and the sign that Capricorn comprises is functioning. So you go right here. Here's the full moon, anaretic degree, which is also a degree of instability, final degree. Maybe that adds another layer of instability. I mean, I guess I would be kind of concerned at just one level that this is right in the degree of Pluto's direct station, and it's that final degree that maybe there are triggers. Maybe we've already seen that with the Trump event, and that was this manifestation in the materiality of this anaretic degree cardinal eclipse cardinal full moon, two cardinal full moons here right in July 2024. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's other, instability that continues with that anaretic degree focus of this full moon. But let's just come back in. So you start here, you go to Mars as the exaltation lord of Capricorn, right, with Gemini, with Jupiter in Gemini. And then you have Saturn and Pisces as the two primary rulers. One thing I want to go into here is the flow of domicile rulership. So this is called a dispositor tree or a domicile tree. It's one of my favorite techniques in natal astrology, this domicile tree or the dispositor tree. And all you do is see how the planets interrelate to each other based only on domicile rulership. And it will tell you how the chart is flowing, where the energies of the chart flow, where they ultimately land or settle in a chart. And often you'll have one or two planets that can be the final dispositors, planets in their own signs. Sometimes you'll have co-final dispositors, which would be planets in a mutual reception or an exchange of signs. Or you'll have a case like this chart, where there's just a bunch of planets, nothing is in its own sign, and there's a bunch that depend on each other. And what you end up with is, 5 planets that all are kind of a co-conspirators for this moment of astrological time, something like that, co-teammates or something like this. So you say Jupiter in Gemini with Mars flowing into Mercury in Leo, back to the sun in Cancer, back to the moon in Capricorn, then you're with Saturn in Pisces, back to Jupiter. And so you see that you're really dealing with 5 sectors and 5 blends. And sometimes in natal astrology, when you see this, it can be a life that maybe is spread out over a few sectors. There's not always a dominant focus. I think what you do next, and this is what I'm going to do on the next screen, but you look for what planets might be strongest, which ones have more power. Sometimes that can tell us where these 5 sectors, even though they interrelate, where they might be wanting to finally settle. I have here on the slide, so a lot of coverage. It's just a chart where there's a lot of houses that become relevant to analyze. And we get that in this full moon. One way to also look at it, what if you're feeling, tired, or things are just spread out and you're not maybe clear? I think it's good to acknowledge that, especially as Mercury is about to retrograde fully in August, that it might not be time here in this local slice of time. We might not be ready yet to move forward yet. I think that comes after Mercury stations direct, and we have a really sweet beginning of September to make a move. That's when I would wait to make a move. You might let this full moon and these energies kind of splay you out a little bit and rest and plan. That could be just one way to maneuver, especially with Mars Saturn square building. I think the whole month of August is one to chill as best as you can and not really do much. Work on things you've already had on your plate would be my recommendation. Clean off your plate, clean off your table, get organized and ready for the fall. Use August to do that. What's good is that in a lot of places in the world, August people take off. So maybe that will help us with our time away. Okay, next slide. And you can see here my software, SolarFire. I love the SolarFire software, but it will calculate and assign a number based on William Lilly's numerical algorithm, effectively using rulership. And he assigns a final number to each planet based on the various forms of rulership. And you can see here how no planet has any power. They're either a zero and peregrine, meaning they're in signs that are irrelevant or independent to their energies, don't really harm them, don't really help them. They're just kind of walking around. Maybe aimless could be a word. And then you've got the moon weaker in Capricorn, and then you have Jupiter, of course, weak in Gemini, and the sign opposite it rules. So what I would just say is that the planets have to rely on each other. It's another major theme of the energy of this moment. Everything kind of needs everything else. And so it's this blasé vibe that I already spoke about. I just wanted to show you all this essential dignities chart. These can be very useful to quickly get a sense of where the strength is in a chart. And I like to do that when you have like 5 planets all intertwined via vis-a-vis rulership. So, okay, keeping going here. What are some of the general themes of Capricorn and this moment in time? I think right out of the gate, we got to just think about the Capricornian, set everything else aside. What is that archetype? Well, I like this song, Chumbawamba. I don't know if some of you remember this. It's a British band, and they released this song, Tub Thumping. I think it was back in the 90s. And it's the classic chorus, I get knocked down, but I get up again. You are never going to keep me down. And it became an anthem, and it's this anthem for just staying with it. And I think that's a pure Capricornian approach. Look at the cover of the record. It's got a guy flexing with the boxing. So that would be the Mars and the fight of Mars, right? Mars exalts in Capricorn. It's a fight side of Saturn. You face a challenge, you face an obstacle, you face a difficulty. You let Mars keep you fighting against those obstacles. And then Saturn might be the long-term vision. Where are you going? What are the goals? The obstacles are there to help form and hone in on where you need to be going ultimately, and increase your power and your skills. You don't get strong by not facing obstacles. And I think Capricorn is one of the strongest signs, especially bodily, because it's an earth sign, rules our body. And any kind of working out or preparation for the battle, I think, is appropriate here. Certainly, it can be all kinds of things bodily. If you're working out in a gym, I think this might be a good way to feel into this moment. Or if you're, anything you're doing that's like training, doesn't have to be in the gym, but training might be a key word for Capricorn. Training so we can face obstacle. And just keep going, everyone. I mean, look, we're here in life. We're here in 2024. Things I think are going to get wild. I have a new video coming out. I think I'm going to finish the editing tomorrow. And it's about how from 2024 to 2026, we have the final sign changes of both Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. So those 3 modern outer planets will all change signs for good in a very compressed time, just under 18 months. And I think we're about to be sucked into some major change. And that means that we need to prepare. We need to, if we get knocked down, get back up. We need to be tough. I think we're going to need to be tough for what's about to come, is my sense. Okay, enough of that. Let me come into the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to come into the derived houses. You guys know, if you've been watching my channel, how I like to look into a full moon or new moon is you put the moon in the first house. And I use the astroseek.com software. Shout out to Peter. He makes it very easy to get a derived houses chart. And you have the sun, you have the moon here right in the first. But what does that do to this domicile tree that we just looked at? I'm going to walk through the 5 co-rulers, or the 5 teammate rulers here in the chart. So you have Saturn in Pisces in the 3rd house. That takes you to Jupiter and Mars and Gemini in the 6th house. Okay, then you go from Gemini to Mercury because it rules Gemini, and you have Mercury and Leo together in the 8th house. Leo is ruled by the sun by domicile, so we're in the 7th house. Cancer is ruled by the moon by domicile, so we're back to the 1st house. And then we go back to Saturn and Pisces. So it becomes kind of unwieldy, doesn't it, to kind of grapple with all of this, and maybe too much to distill. I'm not going to break all of this down in this video. What I'm going to do, and this is the task of the astrologer, when you have so much to distill symbolically, the astrologer's job is to distill it into what that astrologer feels are the most important symbol sets of a given moment in time. And you can do that by talking to your client, listening to their needs, feeling into what might be more symbolically appropriate to layer in to meet the facts of their lives. You can do it in this collective moment, because this is a collective reading, and try to distill into how I think it might be best to, we would call it here redacting, because you're removing some, and then you're revising to center a certain narrative that the astrologer's job is to create. So know that. I mean, every chart, you could put up every planetary point in the software and there's just nothing to read, because every house, it's just too full. So the astrologer is always excising and accentuating what that astrologer feels is important. And that's what I'm going to do here in the rest of this video. You'll see. And so I just want to encourage you there, don't hesitate to not talk about stuff as you're doing and working with astrological symbolism and astrological charts. There's no shame in that. Center what you feel is necessary to center. Go with that gut and that intuition with your astrological work. I think it will very much serve you. So, okay, let's come back here. Let me get some comments here. Sinza, hello from Michigan. Hi, hello. Let me see here. Masdala, change is real. Let me just put this one up. Change is real. Time to ground down more garden. Yeah, get into the garden. Planning, getting into nature can always be good. I think that would also fit with the Capricorn symbolism. Let me see here. That chart feels teamwork and service to me. Let me see. Inari. Yeah, I think teamwork is a good way to think about it. I'm going to get into a little bit of that later. And why I think it can be teamwork is the sun in the 7th and Saturn in the 3rd. There's something about close people around us. And then, of course, the grind of the 6th and the shared assets of the 8th. So that I like that distillation. I could just stop the video and just say teamwork and teamwork with friends or partners. Boom. Let's shut down the video. But we're going to break it down a little bit more. But I think that is part of a big part of the moment. Thanks for that. Let me come in. Polly, Eshe, does the basket tip have any significance regarding action, such as pouring out rather than holding in? I think you're referring to here the minor grand trine. There's 2 minor grand trines. So it's the sun to Neptune, to Mars, Uranus, to, the moon, and then to the sun, and then the moon. Yeah, I mean, these are very supportive energies, baskets. I think they allow us to be held. And I think, what we're going to talk about here in a second is these 2 houses. Saturn being square sort of throws off the basket. These aspect lines, Polly, I wouldn't be drawing a lot of these. If I was using my software, I would not have a lot of these aspect lines. So I think this is a basket, but it's using a lot of things that personally I wouldn't quite use. So I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, just looking at it, maybe this can be something to kind of rest into in a certain way. Birthday on the 21st, Jennifer. Okay, happy birthday coming up here on this full moon. This will be your birthday full moon. Very cool. Balance of self and other. Yeah, that's always when you have the sun opposite the moon. I think every full moon is kind of built in balance of self and other. All right, let's keep pushing. So I want to first talk about this 6th house, Jupiter and Mars co-presence, right in Gemini, ruling the moon by exaltation. And, to me, this, because it's the co-presence of these of the 5 rulers that we're looking at, something about Jupiter and Mars together wants me to accentuate and talk about that. We're into our work processes. Labor is my favorite keyword lately for the 6th. Laboring with the mind, mental labor. A lot of work is in the mind. A lot of life is in the mind. How we think every moment. Are we slaughtering ourselves with negative self-talk? That could be a risk with Mars coming in to join Gemini. Are we lifting ourselves up? Are we trying to find truth, wisdom, and justice? Are we talking about big picture principles that are loving and healing. I think this will be the task with Jupiter coming to meet with Mars rather coming to meet Jupiter in Gemini. Self-talk becomes key, because self-talk is a locus for how we can harm ourselves, how we can create illness for ourselves, mental illness. Anytime you have a 6th house transit and Gemini or Mercury is related, we're talking about the health of the mind. And I want us all to prioritize that during this period with Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. And then, of course, any Capricorn risings or any, in this case, a symbolic full moon where we're going to use derived houses, it becomes kind of a collective reading. But, you might find organizing the work processes, getting into some big picture goals, and getting meticulous with how your work desk functions. You might have to be doing labor, a lot of labor. Like this has an intense focus on the work processes. Use Mars to cut and excise and remove. That's what its job is to just cut things out. You give your manuscript to an editor, they're just going to say, nope, this paragraph goes, these 5 pages go. They're going to tighten it using Mars. And we also might want to bring in here health and wellness, right? Innovative strategies, that's Gemini. But it's the side of this that could be health and wellness. It's not necessarily mental health. You may want to figure out how to tweak those routines. Sometimes with Mercury and with Gemini, it's about listing routines, writing things down. It's possible you may need a guide or a list to rein in Jupiter that can overflow, and to rein in Mars that can move out too fast. As those combine, it could get quite insane, really. So what if you use this Gemini and this Mercury in the 8th to kind of get some lists or get some strategies of material planning and meticulousness to help rein in these kind of explosive energies? I think that would be a classic keyword, Mars with Jupiter, explosion. It's just a classic keyword. So of that combination. So, okay, I'm going to keep shifting. Balance of self and other. I already saw that one. Let's just keep going here. Next slide. Mercury's communication skills in the 8th, amplified by Venus's charm. So now we're into the 8th house. And so I'm skipping right to that 8th where we also have 2 planets. And I want us to understand Mercury and Venus combined can be very powerful energies to create beauty with language, technical detail with visual, with pleasure. This could be communication with persuasion and with, the charming communication. Those would be just the planetary combination keywords. But that it's in the 8th house is bringing in things like handling joint finances. What if this is a time to get together with people that you're embedded in financially and embedded with, and talk about things? How are you feeling with the shared dynamics with people whose bank accounts overlap with yours? Do you need to set new structures or review those financial agreements or arrangements? This would be a great time to do it. And you might want to talk about what you need with Venus and Leo. What are your desires? How can you communicate those with the people who you're enmeshed with financially? And part of why I say this is a good time to review is that we have Mercury in the degree that it will turn to, or in degrees that it will return to. That is to say, Mercury is now in shadow. So these stories that have emerged here, we may be returning to these, and they may not complete even until Mercury enters Libra and leaves Virgo in late September. By sign, that's when this Mercury retrograde will end. And I think that, be aware that there could be an ongoing process. This Mercury retrograde cycle takes us into eclipse season as well. And so it's just good to think about that. There's something that's longer term here about the renegotiations. It's not just a short transit of Mercury in the 8th here. It's embedded in a continued story with having to talk about communicating relationships, Mercury with Venus. Venus will leave, but Mercury is hanging around and staying here. And it's good to just remember that. So here's the dates of Mercury retrograde: 5 August, 28 August. I'll be talking a lot about that in a few videos that I have coming up. My August month ahead will certainly break that down in more detail. Okay, let me come into some of the comments. Merca, thank you. Let me see here. Sorry, that was Paula. Merca, hi, Mars 0 degrees, fresh energy, totally new. Absolutely. And I think Jupiter has front run Gemini a little bit. So Mars adds a kind of accelerative kind of burst to the Mars and Gemini stories that we've been, or sorry, the Jupiter and Gemini stories. Mars will come to add some fresh bursts. I certainly look for some twists and turns to emerge with these Jupiterian revelations for this whole 6 weeks period with Mars and Jupiter together. Paula, let me see here. Let us know the best way to support me. Hugs. Hey, thank you. I really appreciate you asking that. Yeah, at the end, I'll talk a little bit about that, but I would just say a like and a subscribe. I usually don't do that. A lot of creators are like and subscribe. I mean, I just feel like you can. I always have that at the beginning of my videos now. It's no sound or anything, but that helps. It helps the algorithm. But thank you for asking, or kind of you to ask that. Okay, let's keep going. This is the only other symbolic thing that I want to break down, which is this idea of the relational. And this is what Inari, I think, mentioned earlier in the comments. But Saturn in Pisces in the 3rd, Sun in Cancer in the 7th. So what about our primary partnerships? How are those being nurtured? How are those a home for us right now? And then what about our community building, local community building? You see that. And how might we need to bring some seriousification into that local community? Maybe where there's ongoing community work that is taking time because Saturn's route through Pisces is a long one, just under 3 years. So what do I have here? Let me see here. Here it is. Building deep and emotionally resonant connections within one's immediate environment. Deep is Saturn. Emotionally resonant would be the water signs. And then the relationships or connections are the 3rd and 7th house. And so you might find that could even be just a guide as you're negotiating in the daily grind and negotiating. Okay, let me, sorry, I put this back on. Let me hide that again. But as you are, pardon me, a little wonky there with the slides, but as you're in the 6th house grind and that's going crazy and you're trying to figure out like how to contain the Mars Jupiter and stay on task, as you're renegotiating the shared resources or like telling truth to bring your truth into the mix around some of this financial enmeshment, how is the nurturing of the relationship, the emotionally resonant depth being included in those conversations? Because the 6th and 8th house are quite serious. They're quite dry. They're often draining houses. They're not really fun to have to go into like hard labor and renegotiating your deals, but the 7th and 3rd, the water 7th and 3rd, I think can soften us up here. Basically keep in mind that human beings are fallible and, love will accept that fallibility. We have to bring empathy and we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And that helps just everything flow, even the hard labor and the renegotiation of deals. So that's just kind of my short take on that. Let me push through, and now we'll just finish out here the election for the waning phase. Moon in Taurus is back because Mars is gone. So when we do elections, we can use that sector here. I've got an Austin, Texas chart, my hometown, 29 July 2024 is going to be the pick for my election for this waning phase. It's 0131, so very early in the morning, but you can get Taurus moon rising. And the thing about this chart is it's applying very, very close to Venus, so that you love that. I think this is probably the best chart that we'll have. It's an exalted moon. What do I have here? The natural world of Taurus and Leo's passion and zeal. That's what's being accentuated. I also want to mention that Venus will have just emerged from the sun's beams, or 15 degrees out from the sun. I think the heliacal rise already happened. I saw a lot of astrologers talking about that already, but in our Hellenistic models, we use a 15-degree proxy range. So this is a real powerful evening star Venus. Evening star Venus is one that is so beautiful in the night sky. Go check it out. I cannot wait to see it. The first time I'll get to see that beautiful glowing goddess Venus. It's so bright. Often, or some people have mistook it for a spaceship. I mean, that's how bright this thing is. It's shocking, and it's like mesmerizing and hypnotizing. Venus, so bright in the evening sky. One of my favorite parts of all astrology and all visual astrology. And we get that all the rest of the year. And in the next year, we'll have this beautiful, beautiful evening star Venus. Be sure to check it out. But in this chart, it's activated. Moon applies to it. And so natural world of Taurus combined with Leo's passion and zeal, I already said that, but a celebration of nature, a celebration of our bodies, a celebration of the inherent beauty in things. You know, I think about evening summer parties. This might be a nice time to have a kind of relaxed, maybe not too like Gatsbyan, but maybe pull it back a little bit and kind of that evening party, just get into the groove with in a maybe smaller way. It's a waning moon is why I say that. You have Mars square Saturn is why I say that. It might not be time for like total extravagance, but I think a nice chill evening party could be a beautiful, beautiful way to feel into this particular evening. That's Monday, so it'd be like a Sunday. You'll have that moon in Taurus all Sunday. Okay. All right, let me now come into just to catch up on some of these here. Alexis, thanks for your help this week. I appreciate you seeing you, and I'm glad to have engaged with you. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Let me see here. Hubby's birthday on the 29th, Francis. Wonderful. Wish him a happy birthday. Ad script. Is Mercury equally strong in Virgo as it is in Gemini? Yeah, I would say it's as strong in both. I mean, the thing about Mercury in Virgo is that it's exaltation and domicile. So you get two forms of rulership, but you also get two forms of rulership in Gemini because Mercury is the night triplicity lord of air signs. So I think, in my view, it's just as strong. I think the technical, like Lily's system, to go back to that, Lily's weighting system, it would put Mercury stronger in Virgo. I'm skeptical because I think Mercury loves the air element. So to me, it's, you know, they're a pair. It's like in any chart, Virgo and Gemini, those sectors are part of a part of that Mercury story. So I would kind of look in any chart at both of the sectors. And I wouldn't favor necessarily one over the other. Of course, there's other factors. Like in Gemini, if your Mercury's in Gemini, where's Saturn? Because Saturn is a triplicity ruler of Gemini. If your Mercury's in Virgo, where are the Moon and Venus? And that might also give you other layers in a chart to determine, you know, just how difficult Mercury in Virgo versus Mercury in Gemini could be specifically to that chart. Okay. Let me just click to the next slide. I'll come back to questions here in a second, but let's just finish out here. So, you know, my astrology reading schedule is open. It's right here. You can go click to schedule a reading with me. Natal work is what I do. Talk to clients a lot all week. And if you want to talk to me about any of this in your personal context, you know, there it is. Go to my website, sjanderson144.com, and just click that. Okay. And then the second thing I want to let everybody know here, I haven't really talked about this. I mentioned it in my descriptions the last few videos, but I'm back on Instagram. I joined that again. I'm having a lot of fun over there. I just really like the way Instagram functions. It's a lot more creative, so I can share a lot of my visual art and bring that in on my feed. And then if you click on my Reels feed, I've just got a lot of Reels. I've been posting a bunch every day, astrology Reels. I also cross-post those on my YouTube channel. So you've probably seen some of those shorts on YouTube that I've had. But if you're on Instagram, yeah, give me a follow over there if you want to check out what I'm doing over there and just, you know, if that's your platform. I mean, it's a kind of a cool platform, isn't it? It's so visual and so sensuous, like it's Taurian, you know, it's Venusian. So I'm glad to be back there. And it is not like as politically charged as some of the other social media or as debate centric as some of the other social media. So I'm finding that a relief where I can just kind of celebrate beauty and not really worry about fighting or attacks or anything like that. Let me see here. And so that's the final slide. So that was the video. I hope you guys are going to have a lovely, lovely full moon in Capricorn. Let's just hang out here. I'm going to do maybe 10 minutes. We can talk, whatever you want to talk about, questions, bring anything in that you'd like to talk about here. I'm actually, let me get this off. I want to come back to add this back to stage. There you can see the full Instagram feed there, but okay, let me come here and just go to this next comment. I intend to go full Gatsby. Hey, Teresa, nothing wrong with that. Go full Gatsby. You know, I may do some full Gatsby too. You never know. That's what is so cool about astrology. Like, we know it's a nice Venus moon, moon in Taurus. And let me go back to the slide so we can all see this. But we know this is a lovely exalted moon, safe from Mars, right? Mars is averse, sextile Saturn. Saturn is not in a hard aspect, applying to Venus. And that alone is like a green light for some kind of Taurian thing. So we may be pulled in. I love this about astrology. I'll be just like chilling, going, working. And then all of a sudden, like transits I've talked about, and then I get a call from a friend, hey, come out. And then I'm out, I'm like a workaholic, serious guy, but then I'm out like at a club all night, and I didn't even plan on it, but it would match the symbolism. And so I try to stay open to just life as it emerges. We shouldn't let our astrology, in my view, restrict or rob us from what can be. Rather, we can use astrology as a directive, as a kind of contextual guide, but always defer to the intuition and to how life is unfolding, because we may rob ourselves from really cool stuff just because we're like, oh, the astrology shouldn't be allowing this. Well, no, life is the ultimate determiner. What reality is doing is the number one determiner. So yeah, go full Gatsby, Teresa. I may have to join you on that. I like the chart. I really love the chart. I'm glad to have Taurus back, and I'm glad to have Venus so involved and newly visible. It's kind of a really cool energy. Okay, let me come back to the next one. Lucy, greetings, SJ from Montreal. Hey, I'm happy to be with you, Lucy. Thanks for sharing that. Greetings to you. Montreal, cool. I bet it's not too hot up in Montreal. That's nice, but I'm sure it's really cold down in the winter there. Paula, definitely enjoying the shorts. Glad. I like shorts. They're fun for me to make because I can edit them. It doesn't take too long. Making a longer video, it's just a lot of energy. Shorts are really nice because I can just flow, take one topic, create a little offering, and send them out every day. I'm trying to do them, or as much as possible. Paula, also good to be uncomfortable with uncertainty. Absolutely. Life is uncertain. So, we better make friends with it, or we're going to struggle in life. These moments are priceless. Absolutely, Annie. Every moment is priceless. Every moment of awareness and consciousness, in my view, this is part of my core spiritual belief set. All life, all moments are precious, priceless. And I love astrology because it tells us every moment's priceless because it'll never repeat. The ephemeris never repeats. So you'll never have these planets ever again exactly like this. Now, maybe in millions of years or something, if we were to put these cycle out within millions and millions and millions of years. But my guess, and I can already tell you, the fixed stars will be floating, right? They have precession. Those fixed stars aren't going to be exactly where they are in this chart. There's really never two moments ever alike. So I really love this attitude. And I think astrology informs this, allows us to understand how priceless everything really is. I'm going to say this anecdote here. There was a video going around Instagram, or I think Twitter, but the guy was like, I'm going to give you $1 million. Will you accept it? And the guy in the street's like, yeah, I'll take it. And he says, but you can't wake up tomorrow. And he's like, nope, I'm not going to take the million. And the point is, he was like, the guy that he asked was like, this is the point. Your life's worth more than $1 million, actually. Like, no one is going to take that bet. I wouldn't take it. Hell no. I want to wake up and go, like, I got some limes. I'm going to cut them, put them in my water, drink. I can't wait to drink that tomorrow morning. That's worth millions for me. Those precious simplicities of life. So thank you, Annie. I really, really appreciate that. Ever informative, always enjoying sitting in and listening. Thanks, Inari, best wishes. Fanura, yay, made it. Yep, right here at the end, but I'm glad you got to catch the end. And let's see here. Tata Top Shelf. I like Mercury retrograde. I love it too. And you've got here, it's when the X's start creeping out. Yeah, it can be that. It can be that. But I like it because it's a time to chill. And I usually try to rest. And if I have things I'm trying to elect, usually I might have a project or an event or something. Mercury retrograde comes around. It's a wonderful time just to not do anything and wait and plan and get ready for when the best election comes after Mercury stations direct and becomes a morning star. Then it's time to go. And Mercury retrograde tells us wait, chill, prepare, back up. So I love it for that. It's every time, it's 3 times a year, the universe telling us, hey, chill and rest with the mind, think less, relax. So that's my favorite thing. Venus retrogrades, maybe for me at least, have been more when the relationship stuff happens, and we get one next year. We'll get Venus retrograde in Pisces and Aries back to Pisces in March, April next year. Be a big theme of the 2025 astrology. All right, a few more of these and then I'll jam out here. Something, happy to make it to the live. I'll never forget when you said about Libra in one of your videos, the mental component of beauty. Yep, I have a Libra stellium in my 4th house, Jupiter 18 Mars, 24 Moon, 25. Love it. Yep, it's the mental component of beauty. Libra to me is the art critic. So you have the art, you have the visceral painting where you're just moving maybe, and it's not as maybe thoughtful in a certain way. And then the art critic is the one that comes in with the mind and creates language and puts that on the beauty. And sometimes art criticism can get a negative reputation, too serious, too critical. Sirius is Saturn, exaltation ruler of Libra. Mercury is triplicity lord of Mercury. So it's like serious critique. But I think the other side of it is that we can enjoy the art sometimes more deeply when we let it touch our mind and the land of ideas, and we let it connect to the histories that are part of our art world and the inheritances we have from other artists. So I love Libra to appreciate the arts. Every time I walk into museums, I think Libra, or an art exhibit, because it's a structured sharing of the art. And then there's always write-ups about the art. So I appreciate something with that, mentioning that, because I love thinking about that again too. It's beautiful. Okay, so maybe a minute or two more. Let's just see if you got any more questions. I'm happy to stay. Alyssa LA, okay, beautiful. Got the video playing at 2x speed to catch up on the live. Okay, well, you'll catch up, enjoy it. Maybe that's a good signal to just kind of wind down with it. I think we'll leave it here. You guys, great to be with you. Enjoy your full moon in Capricorn this weekend, and have a lovely, late July's astrology. We'll talk really soon, and really glad to be with you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.